Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and it is Waiver Wire Tuesday. And as always, I am joined by none other than PFF's own Dwain "The Rock" McFarland to accomplish the task that we always go after, which is to set up your fantasy football squads for all the success in the world. Dwain, we talked last night for like 2 hours, and now we're back today. Not for 2 hours, but we got some waivers to talk. How's it going, man?
Yeah, man, good. Waiver wire is pretty nasty this week.
Not great.
But there is a waiver wire, Ian, and that's what we're here for, because it's the waiver wire show.
As always, the players we're going to list, not all of them are necessarily recommended targets. I've gone through PFF's 3 to 4 waiver articles, looked across the industry just to get an idea of who's being talked about the most. We'll try to tell you where, the public is right and where you should be going after and where maybe you should stay away from position by position. So, Dwain, as always, we'll get started with our quarterback streamer of the week. Seems like it really is coming down to either Cam Newton against the Falcons or Taysom Hill against the Jets. Picture perfect matchups for both these guys, because Atlanta has the single worst pass rush in the league. If there is going to be a time where Cam will actually have some room to work in the pocket, it would seemingly be in this spot. And we did get clarification from Matt Rule today, who said, I certainly anticipate Cam Newton will be the starter against the Falcons. And then with Taysom against the Jets have the league's single worst rushing defense in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to opposing running backs, which we're kind of expecting Taysom Hill to be if he winds up being under center here, playing through that mallet injury on his hand. So it is terrible how bad he is as a real-life passer, and playing Hurts not going to help that. We also have Deontay Harris suspended for the next 3 games. But truly, if we can pencil in any quarterback for something close to 15 carries per game, it's going to be tough to keep them off the streamer mat. We also got Taylor Heineke going up against the Cowboys. Last 6 starts, he's returned 3 inside the top 12. Teddy Bridgewater, he hasn't had more than 2 top 12 performances since week 2. And Jimmy Garoppolo, who is more on line with Heineke with 3 top 12 performances in his last 7 games. So for me, Dwain, I think Cam and Taysom are in the top tier here. There's enough concerns with both of them either being outright benched or, in Taysom's case, just being too ineffective to play with the injury, that I don't think they're necessarily going to be locked and loaded QB1s this week, but I still would prioritize them over these other guys. Then I got Heineke in the tier of his own. Perfectly fine, top 15, top 16 quarterback. Teddy and then Jimmy Garoppolo further down the road. I would rather not start them if at all possible. So thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, all you.
No, I think you have it right. I mean, Cam Newton in week 11 handled 36% of the design rushing attempts for the Panthers, then 16% the following week, but he was benched. You got Taysom Hill at 32% of the design rushing attempts in week 13 against Dallas. So I think, yeah, those are your top 2. And like you said, the matchups are there. You get Atlanta, you get the Jets, who both are in the top 5 as far as giving up rushing attempts to opposing offenses. So that's a good spot. Taysom Hill, yeah, the finger thing, I prefer Newton. Just because I know Taysom Hill for sure has a limitation. Now, his floor could be better because he could actually start and Newton may not. But I feel like there's just more upside with Newton. I could get the same rushing attempts, and I get an opportunity for someone that can actually throw the ball as well. So I would actually probably tier them like Newton, then tier of their own Taysom. Ooh. Then I would say it's Heineke, Garoppolo, Bridgewater, same order that you have there. And Bridgewater, it's like, how can you have these good receivers and just not be able to do anything, and all you want to do is check down the ball? He really struggles against pressure. He's got all sorts of problems going on. Technically you should be able to think that anytime a quarterback has those kind of weapons, Ian, that at any point, they could just pop off, right, and have a big game. But I think I trust Garoppolo more just because we've seen him actually do it more over the past 4 to 5 weeks.
Potential to get Deebo Samuel back as well. I also have Jimmy G over Teddy. Again, people, that's Cam, number 1 streamer of the week, then Taysom Hill, then Taylor Heineke, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Teddy Bridgewater. As always, these are based on guys that are available in the majority of leagues. So if for some reason Kirk Cousins or someone like that is available in your league, yes, go ahead and start them, even though we didn't talk about them. Just something to keep in mind. And I would just say, I realize how bad Cam and this Panthers offense was before their week 13 bye. Just realized in that game, Cam and PJ Walker were under pressure on 18 of their 36 dropbacks, 50%. And again, they are facing the Falcons' league worst pass rush. So I think the single biggest problem with that Panthers offense should be somewhat mitigated because of this matchup. Now, Dwayne, we got some running backs to go over. Number one of which is Sony Michel. So he is rostered in 68% of leagues, but I'm still seeing him at the top of all the waiver articles. So I figured we should talk about him anyway. But yeah, go get the freaking man. I think it's as simple as that. Yes, Darrell Henderson does have the potential to be back in a more of a full-time role. He was active last week, but seemingly for emergency purposes only. But I don't know, Dwayne. There's been some murmurs. I believe it was Jordan Rodriguez, who always does some great beat writer work for the Rams, talking about how Sony might just be the feature back down the stretch. It wouldn't be the first time Sean McVay pulled this. He took Todd Gurley out of the freaking main he took Todd Gurley away from being the feature back for CJ freaking Anderson in 2018. You can say Gurley was banged up, but he was still active for all those games. So I do wonder if Sony, even once Henderson's a little bit more healthy to suit up, could continue to be the Rams' RB1. Dwayne, if we have $10 a fab, if we have $30 a fab, if we have $55 a fab, all of that is going to Sony Michel this week.
Yeah, I think just on the upside that you just talked about, and even if not, maybe you just get him for one more week, this week. We're just to that point in the season where, it's like, what are you waiting for? Most teams are heading into the playoffs. So, yeah, with me, Michel, it's by far the best offense, right, of all these teams that we're about to talk about. The problem we have with a lot of these teams is their offenses are absolutely terrible. So Michel is actually on the Rams, so we know you get a top 5 scoring attack. And you also have a coach that has shown a willingness in the past to get the ball to his running backs inside the 5, really run the game has really ran more through the quarterback this season. But we know that McVay has that gear, and at a minimum, he wants to stay balanced to keep the play action and everything else working. So there's going to be opportunity.
So on my handy dandy show sheet here, I have a couple running backs listed, and then I have the projected order that I want to read off to everyone. And for running backs, I literally just have Sony and a couple dots and then sheesh, because I don't even know what to do with the rest of these groups. Yes, we have Rashad Penny doing some things for the Seahawks, but Adrian Peterson is already just as involved, and you would really like to think they're going to be passing the ball a little bit more here moving forward. But who knows? Also got Homer, DJ Dallas, whoever the hell else is going to be in that backfield. It is a good matchup against the Texans, but we just know it's crowded. We also got Amir Abdullah against the Falcons, followed by Buffalo, Tampa, New Orleans. Maybe he carves out a role getting targets, but it's far from cemented. Chuba Hubbard remains the more likely player to get the majority of touches. We got the Titans running backs. Everyone is just forgetting, I guess, that Jerry McNichols is probably back from the concussion protocol. No, I don't want to start Hilliard or Deontay Foreman. I think McNichols, if anyone, is probably the guy to try to pick up ahead of this potentially good spot against Jacksonville. But once again, 3-back committee, I'd like to just refrain from it as long as the Titans continue to be this bad. And then finally, the Texans backfield, which, Dwayne, I think we've just talked about too much on this podcast this year, and we barely talked about them at all. So screw the Houston running backs. I'm even seeing like Boston Scott waiver wire claims. That's how bad everything is going. Remember, the Eagles are on a bye. Jordan Howard is probably going to be back afterwards, and Miles Sanders has an extra time to get ready. So out of all these just mid-as-hell running backs I just mentioned, Dwayne, does anyone spark your interest?
Honestly, I was just sitting here trying to think, is there someone that we don't have on this list that I should bring up? Because I don't want to talk about any of these. And like you and I were talking before the show, usually by the time Ian and I record this, I'm about 65% through the utilization report, writing it. Today I had some other stuff going on, so I'm about 40%. So I've got less of it done. So normally I'll just have something in my head, like if it's already sitting there, but I'm just like looking real quickly like at these teams. The only other, the rest of these are probably just as gross. Like, if we were to talk about the Jets, like they've got the same thing going on. Yeah. They've got 3 backs involved.
Carlos Hyde? Like, how much do we want to make our listeners throw up right now?
I know. We don't want to make them throw up. So I'll move on. If I think of something later, then I'll tweet something out. But yeah, it's looking at the rest of these, I would prioritize. Do I even have to try to prioritize these, or do you just?
I don't think so. It's Sony Michel, and that's it.
They're all the same problem. What you just said. They're all committees, and they're all bad offenses, right?
With minimal potential upside.
Right. And Penny, we don't even know for sure, like, what's going to happen when Alex Collins can play. Like, I don't know. Like, That could be an issue too. So the way I look at the Seahawks, they're not going to commit to any one of these backs. And it's not going to be 2 backs. It's going to be 3 to 4. And you've got the team that runs the least plays in the NFL. Amir Abdullah, I actually I think, better than the Seahawks backs, just because with the Panthers, I wouldn't mind having the passing down back. We've seen consistency as far as Abdullah over the last several weeks. I agree with you, though. Chuba Hubbard, right, is really the player that, if all things are going right the way the Panthers want, which isn't always the case because the offense is bad, Hubbard's going to be the player out there. But I think Abdullah is squarely, in the conversation. If you want to talk, if you're in a PPR format, Abdullah, I would rather have him over the Seattle backs. And then Hilliard, it's like you said, we talked about it last week, I think, so I won't belabor it. But I'm with you. I happen to think that McNichols probably gets his rollback, and if not, it could be a 3-way committee. So there's just too many potential situations where you're just not going to like it. So whatever you do on those guys, if you want to just throw a little out there on them and you have somebody to drop, fine, go ahead. But good luck figuring out how you're going to start them.
Absolutely. If you are just completely in dire need of throwing a flex in somewhere, I do think probably Abdullah, Penny, McNichols would be the 3 guys. But there's just so little confidence because of everything.
Was there a question mark behind that? Was that like an I'm
Ian Hartitz? Let's get out of this freaking group. All right.
Hey, what I would say, what I would rather do, because these aren't going to give you much anyway. I would rather just pick up Ronald Jones.
Yeah.
and take like a 4 point. Now I get it. You may be in your playoff matchup and you need 7 points instead of 4, Dwayne. But if Leonard Fournette went down, we've talked about it a few times, you probably got a mid-range RB2, and there's just not many sitting out there. I guess the other one would be Samaje Perine.
What about Marlon Mack?
Marlon Mack is a good, just total stash on the bench, but you can't have him near a lineup because it's 0%. Of
course not. No, I'm just talking actual handcuffs that are probably on.
I'm with you. Yeah. No, I think Mac is definitely, he would be on the radar. The way I always try to think about it, Ian, is I just put myself in everybody's shoes. If all of a sudden X player was hurt, how excited would I be about this player Y? And I'll tell you right now, if if Jonathan Taylor went down, which he won't this weekend because there's a bye week, I promise you, Marlon Mack, people would unload everything they have to get Marlon Mack. There would be no doubt about it. Now, he may not get the absolute workload that Jonathan Taylor's gotten. It might be more split with him and Naheem Hines, but I know that that's somebody that everybody would be all in on. Just looking real quick. I don't think there are any others. Cleveland, no.
You said Perine, right?
Yep, Samaje Perine.
I guess Darrell Williams, if someone let him go with Clyde back. It's not the biggest ceiling in the world, but you could still potentially have the Chiefs RB1 if CEH randomly gets hurt.
Yeah, no, I think Williams, out of everybody we've talked about besides Michel, would be the player I would roster over all of these. Maybe besides Michel.
Yeah. Devontae Booker, you could have a volume-based RB2 potentially. Yeah, it's gross. Yep. We're just we're grasping for straws here. Let's move on.
We just feel bad about our list. That's all that's happening.
With some wide receivers now. Yeah, the list is the list. Now we'll go over some wide receivers. Russell Gage really topping a lot of these, and deservedly so. Since return from injury, he was really on and off at first. Wide receiver 15, then wide receiver 110 because he goose-egged, then wide receiver 20, then another goose-egg. But over the last 3 weeks, wide receiver 36, wide receiver 14, and wide receiver 7. Dwayne, I guess the assumption with Gage, while we weren't really on him more so than we were until recently, was just the fact that we figured Patterson and Kyle Pitts would always kind of be the top 2 options in this passing game. We've seen Gage actually work as the number 1 more weeks than not. I know Patterson's been banged up, maybe focusing more primarily just that running back. We've talked enough about Kyle Pitts' struggles, but Gage is someone that we talked about on our review pod. He could be sneaking in that top 30 here on a pretty frequent basis moving forward.
Yeah, the interesting thing with the Falcons, the way that they operate their offense, it's really just a 3-person funnel all the time. So if you look at their targets per route run, but this is what's cool about targets per route run, right? It's only for the time that the player is out there on the field. So Calvin Ridley, for example, 30% targets per route run versus man coverage. Well, Cordero Patterson's 30%, Kyle Pitts is 29%, Russell Gage is 27%. So we always talk about these players, they step into these roles and how it doesn't always mean they're going to get the same utilization, especially at receiver. You're going to see it more often at running back, like they'll just plug the next person in. But at receiver, you've got to be able to get open. There's just more nuance to what's going on. And so the positive is we're seeing Gage step right into that role. So it's really Pitts, Patterson, and Gage. They're all heavily utilized. When you look at it against zone coverage, they do spread it out a little bit more. Your boy CPAT, he stays up there, Ian, 28%, but Pitts drops to 18%, Russell Gage drops to 18%, and then you get some of these other guys more involved, like Mike Davis, Olamide Zaccheaus, those guys. But anyway, point being that it's really more of a funnel most of the time, just really through three guys. And so Russell Gage is in that threesome at this point. And so he's done a nice job against man coverage. And then this last week, they played against a team that was primarily all zone, and he led the team in passing targets. So that's good for him.
Gage deserves to be the top waiver wire ad of the week at wide receiver, and I think follow behind KJ Osborn, who should be stepping in as the number 2 wide receiver in Minnesota with Adam Thielen dealing with that high ankle injury. Thielen and Dalvin Cook, for that matter, were listed as DMPs on the Vikings estimated Monday practice report. They don't actually practice on Monday, but they make the teams put out these estimated reports anyway. Osborn this year, he has at least 5 targets in 5 games, and he's turned in wide receiver 34, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 68, and most recently wide receiver 13 and wide receiver 21 finishes. So Dwain, we've seen him at least show the ability to produce, some semblance of solid fantasy production. Facing the Steelers on Thursday night, maybe not the most ideal matchup, but at the same time, hardly the same juggernaut, defense we've seen in past years. I think Osborn, particularly with 4 teams on buys again, will be another guy that's pretty tough to keep out of the top 36.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll have him in the top 36, but he'll definitely be close. I think he's worthy for sure of a waiver ad for the week. And I agree with where, you've got him sitting here. Look at him last week, and we mentioned this, on the recap show, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the primary thing is 94% of the time that Kirk Cousins was in a route, you had KJ Osborn on the field with Adam Thielen going down really early in the game, handled 16% targets per route run, 17% of the targets. So, those are numbers you can live on. And like you said, he's already shown things, earlier in the season, so we could easily see him have a 20-25% target share week. I think that's within his wheelhouse. We're going to find out, right? He's going to be in a full-time role now. He's going to have more attention on him. So I'm definitely interested in KJ Osborn. I think he'll be a borderline wide receiver 3 for me this week, probably more like a high-end wide receiver 4. But he'll be close to being in the conversation of, he'll at least be in the flex conversation.
Very fair. Got some Lions receivers getting some love. Amon-Ra St. Brown had the game-winning touchdown. Bunch of other catches. Josh Reynolds has had back-to-back usable weeks. And I still don't want to touch any of these guys, and that goes for Khalif Raymond as well. Do we really think Goff is going to replicate what he just did at home against the Vikings' sad group of cornerbacks? Now, in Mile High against the freaking Denver Broncos, I sure don't. Stay away from these guys. If you're just, we've all been in those. I don't know if we all have, but Dwain and I, and I'm sure a lot of you have been in those, 14-team leagues where you have injuries, you have buys, you just need somebody to go out there that is an actual starting NFL player. So in that perspective, okay, but none of these guys are going to be sniffing wide receiver 3 status, unlike Gage and Osborn. Dwain, where we have some, I think, more interesting news to potentially talk about is situations where we have had starters now leave the lineup. And first of all, that begins with the Chargers, who could be without Keenan Allen, who got placed on the COVID list this afternoon against the Giants. I have scanned the internet. I have not seen anything that indicates if Keenan is or is not vaccinated. If he's not vaccinated, then he'll definitely be out this week. If he is vaccinated, he has a chance to return 2 positive tests by Sunday. So I think we all know if Keenan is out, all wheels go for Mike Williams. He's going to be really hard to keep out of, honestly, wide receiver 1 territory. At a minimum, he'll be an upside wide receiver 2. You're starting him either way. I guess the question, Dwain, becomes, what do we make of Jalen Guyton and also Josh Palmer, who figured to be filling out these 3 wide receiver sets? We need to remember that, like, Austin Eckler's there, so the number 2 wide receiver in LA could very well be the number 3, number 4 pass game option, depending how things go with the tight end. But at a minimum, we know Justin Herbert can sling that damn thing. We have a decent enough matchup against the Giants. I'm sure Bradbury's going to be matching Mike Williams most of the time. What are your thoughts on Guyton and Palmer as potential 1-week fill-ins?
Yeah, it's I think it's a tough one to figure out. It could go several ways, right? It could be rotating those two guys more on the field. It could be, and I don't know which one would really play like the Keenan Allen role, right? He has a very specific role. Like we just went on ADOT, like Palmer's at 10, and then you got Guyton at 12. So it's not like they're super far apart. It'd be one thing if like Guyton had been like kind of like last year where he was really more the down the field kind of target. He was more like Mike Williams' handcuff. But Palmer, I mean, slightly ahead in targets per route run on the season. So like if you look at that as the equalizer, 14% versus 9% for Guyton. But really Guyton's the guy that's been on the field more lately, Ian. 59% of the routes, 62% of the routes, 56% of the routes. But then again, like is he really more just of a decoy because those routes are all pretty empty? And is it going to be Palmer playing the Allen, spot? So it's tough for me to make a for sure like proclamation like around this that like it's going to be this player. I think your guess is as good as mine. I like both of these young players, but I think there's a reason, right, why we've got them below a more known situation like KJ Osborn, where we've seen it. And we're like, oh, this is the guy that's going to be on the field more. I just don't know for sure with the Chargers. If I had to pick one of the two, I'm going to lean to the player that's been on the field more so far, and that would be Guyton.
I would say, and it's similar to the Minnesota situation, we haven't gotten to tight ends yet, but that's another thing where we shouldn't always expect the backups to come in and immediately see a ton of work. Oftentimes the starters just end up, at least at wide receiver, the existing starters still just end up seeing their workloads increase. So maybe, man, Jared Cook could actually have a little bit something to say this week. Again, I don't want to start the guy, though, but he has played 65% of his snaps in the slot or out wide. They use 3 tight ends every single week with Parham, Cook, and Steven Anderson, even Trey McKitty, depending on what you want to kind of call his positional designation. So, yeah, I think the main answer in LA is like just start Mike Williams with all the confidence in the world. Guyton and Palmer probably, I would say, end up in the wide receiver 4 area.
I mean, I'll be honest. I feel more comfortable with Cook just because we've seen his history and we've seen him have big days even with Palmer. Yeah. So that's, I mean, when I say not with Josh Palmer, obviously, but yeah. So I'm leaning towards Cook over these guys. But to your point, it's like overall, I would just stay away from it. Yeah. Just use the guys that we like. I'm sorry, don't know why my Herbert brain said Palmer.
Final situation here. The Saints will be without Deontay Harris for the next 3 weeks. He has been suspended for an off-season DUI. That leaves Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway to work as the top guys. I'll be interested, Dwayne.
Yeah. We have Mallet Finger. You've already covered Mallet Finger.
But what if Sean Payton? Because we're recording this on Monday afternoon. Because we don't want to touch these guys. Simeon. Yeah, if there's Trevor Simeon, then what are your thoughts? Because I agree, we are not touching them. If Taysom Hill is still under center.
Then Traquan has kind of taken the step forward, over the last several weeks. He obviously was a complete dud against the Cowboys, on last Thursday night, but. He's gotten his routes up over the 80% mark. He had really kind of taken, that lead spot. We had seen Marquez Callaway kind of be up and down through the year. I'm done with Callaway, and maybe it's because I got excited about him in the preseason because I just thought he looked good in those games. But again, it's just the preseason. So I like Traquan. He would be my pick of the two, but I would go minimal on these guys, and I might change my mind a little more if I hear Trevor Simeon's going to be the starter.
Quickly to summarize the wide receiver position, go feature Russell Gage and KJ Osborn as your wide receiver 3s of the week. They are ahead of everyone else. Lions receivers, okay if you need a flex fill-in, but let's not get too carried away. Similar vibe as the Chargers guys. We will be a little more high on Traquan Smith if Trevor Simeon winds up taking over for Taysom Hill, but that is not a guarantee at the moment. Real quick now on the tight ends, because the only real notable...
Hey, just real quick on the receivers, Ian, okay. Just thinking you just had a bye week. I would probably take MVS over most of the guys we just talked about, down the stretch, with Aaron Rodgers. He's available a lot. Against for the Colts, we've seen T.Y. Hilton get a little more involved. He's available quite a bit. Jacksonville, no. Raiders, no. I'm just looking real quick at these teams. Miami, we talked about Parker on the pod this morning. So Devontae Parker actually would be probably second on this list for me. Well, not for this week because he's on bye, but if it's just a rest of the season thing, then Parker probably goes below Russell Gage if you're not just needing someone to start for this weekend. That's probably it. I know we got Corey Davis out for the season, but I don't really know with the Jets what that opens up. I think it's probably just all in on Elijah, and you're done.
Oh man, I almost touted a Browns wide receiver, but I can't do it.
I was leaving that one open for you.
4 games since
you going Peoples-Jones or what?
Not really, man. Since the Browns have cut OBJ, Baker has 1 touchdown pass to his wide receivers, and OBJ has 2 touchdowns. And we'll move on before I piss off the few remaining Browns fans that still listen to this podcast. Over at tight end, only really have one bit of news, and that is Logan Thomas, who, good news, he did not suffer a torn ACL. We were initially told that report on Sunday night. Rapshi has come back and said that after further tests, it is not a torn ACL. There still is damage, though, and he's expected to miss time. The problem is Ricky Seals-Jones wasn't able to suit up last week with the hip injury, so we could still see Bates either keep the job, which I think is unlikely, but they also could split it if RSJ isn't back. And that is what we need in Washington. That's what we don't need in Washington, I should say. We need the 100% role for whoever's going to be out there. We can get behind them, but I would not feel comfortable starting RSJ in his first game back while he's still dealing with his hip. Foster Moreau at the Chiefs. Darren Waller is now being considered day-to-day, so potentially he could be back sooner rather than later. But look, Moreau, just because of one bad week, the role's the same. He's still a borderline tight end 1 that is a perfectly fine fill-in if you need one. We got Freiermuth at the Vikings. Tough matchup. We've seen Minnesota shut down guys like George Kittle, be one of the better defenses against tight ends. But honestly, Freiermuth and just the way he can get 5 to 8 targets in a kind of normal game script for the Steelers, I still think I would probably prefer him above Moreau. How do you feel with that, Dwain? Moreau versus Freiermuth this week?
Yeah, I want Freiermuth.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Now,
Ebron went to IR, so we know we at least get 2 more weeks, unless he went to season ending. I haven't even looked. I just saw last week when Ebron got put on IR. But either way, the answer this week and the week after at least is Freiermuth.
Just making sure we are on the same page. And we are. What about Tyler Conklin? How much of an upgrade are we giving him without Thielen? Not that big, or are you actually thinking like tight end 1 now?
No, I think he's a low-end tight end 1 now. But that's where I think all these guys are.
Yeah.
I have Foster Moreau more a high-end tight end 2, just because we haven't seen enough, but the utilization is going to be there. Freiermuth has proven it. Conklin's actually proven it to us in a couple of games, and now he's just going to be able to see more action. So I would put Conklin, at that bottom of the tight end 1 tier.
Yeah, it is. Now that I'm looking more at Moreau, like even in that Cowboys game, man, he played 89% of the offensive snaps. He's basically had back-to-back duds. I mean, I know no one started him in Week 12, so we didn't care that much about it, but it's tough to just completely look at that Week 7 and assume that's going to be each and every week. So,
And it's not like they didn't need him. I mean, they don't have anyone else. They have Hunter Renfrow, and that's it. If Moreau, the other challenge is like Moreau has got to deal. He's a player coming in, and he's going to have to deal with, these defenders focusing on him because there's not much else. There's not a deep threat, unless they get Deshaun Jackson out there more.
And it sounds like Waller actually has a legit chance to play this week. So I really would prioritize Freiermuth number 1 and Conklin probably number 2. And then Moreau, because Freiermuth and Conklin are going on Thursday night. So this is kind of one of those situations we had last week. I had people that got screwed with the Taysom Hill, Jalen Hurts type situation. When these guys are that close, just give me Freiermuth or give me Conklin, and then we don't have to worry about Waller coming back by the weekend. So after that, RSJ, he's not a bad guy to stash. We just got to make sure he's healthy. I don't think he's helping us that much this week. And beyond that, if you really want to get gross with Evan Ingram, whoever is your cup of tea, be my guest, but I am not going to go there. Dwain, anything else you want to say about tight ends?
No, man, that's it.
Quick recap of everything we've just gone over.
One thing real quick, Ian, and I know we normally just do 50% or more, but I was just looking at this. So Julio is available about 40% of the time, according to Fantasy Pros. So Julio Jones, where would you put him in that crappy receiver list that we just went through? Just because we know folks play in all size leagues, so I wanted to throw the name out there. Just make sure you go check. I get it if you're in the leagues like what Ian and I mostly play in. He's not going to be there. But there are leagues where he's probably available.
I'd 100% put him above Russell Gage. Dude, Julio has been fine this year when he's played. He just has barely been out there.
There you go. Yeah? So 40% of the time he's available, so you guys take a look.
40% of the time, go pick him up every damn time. Real quick, again, rehashing everything we just went over. Quarterback streamer of the week is Cam Newton against those Falcons. After him, Taysom Hill, Taylor Heineke, then Jimmy G and Teddy Bridgewater. At running back, we want Sony Michel, and that is just about it. But if you really want to get gross, you can look at Amir Abdullah, Jerry McNichols, and Rashad Penny. At wide receiver, Dwain just mentioned Julio. Yeah, go fucking get Julio Jones if he's available. But we also got Russell Gage, KJ Osborn giving us some solid wide receiver 3 flex appeal. Lions wide receivers, Jalen Guyton, Josh Palmer. They can give us an okay wide receiver 4 potentially. Just don't get your expectations too high. Same goes with Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway, but only if Trevor Siemian ends up getting that job back. At tight end, we are prioritizing Pat Freiermuth as the number 1 ad, then Tyler Conklin, then Foster Moreau, and then potentially RSJ down the stretch. And that is going to wrap up our week 14, Dwain. We made it to week 14. Week 14, waiver wire, half hour, whatever the hell you want to call it. Anything else you want to get off your chest, Dwain?
No, man. The only other thing, one other name we mentioned at receiver was Devontae Parker. If you don't need the player for this week, so I would put him. I would say I'm with Ian. It's Julio Jones, then Russell Gage, then Devontae Parker, then KJ Osborn. If you're just looking for somebody for week 15 or to have on your roster in the playoffs.
Great call. And just a stat to leave you all with that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about, but found this today, thought it was kind of cool. Tom Brady in the red zone since joining the Buccaneers, including the playoffs, 60 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. GOAT's gonna GOAT. For Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.